Hello to everybody. My name is Gemma Vilahur. I would like to warmly welcome you to the ESC TV here in Barcelona 2022. So first of all, I would like to deeply say that it's a pleasure and an honor for me to interview Professor Philip Moon. Welcome to the stage. Welcome to Barcelona.
Thank you for having me.
I must say he has been the lecturer this year, the 2022 lecturer of Florence Nightingale of nurse-led research. He gave an outstanding talk this morning about nurse-led research in congenital heart disease. And from that talk, I had several questions that rose to my mind, which I would like to just start asking you. First of all, I think just for the sake of the audience, who is Florence? Who was Florence Nightingale? I think we deserve a few words about her.
True. Florence Nightingale was a nurse coming from UK, and she became famous due to her work during the Crimea War at the end of the 19th century. And to a certain extent, she is considered to be the mother of nursing nowadays, but I tend to say she is the mother of the professionalization of nursing, because you have to know, when she was working at the Crimea War, she tried to underpin the care with science. She was looking at infection rates, and she found out that when you have more space between the beds, between the wounded soldiers, you had less infections. She was making statistics on that. She was analyzing this. And to a certain extent, it is this scientific approach to the nursing care which made her famous. And that's why we can say she's the mother of nursing, and she's the mother of nursing science and the professionalization of nursing.
Great, yeah, definitely. You presented all your work in congenital heart disease, but when did you, your interest in, say, cardiovascular nursing started? And then what was the trigger that moved you to investigate and to do research within congenital heart disease?
Yeah, well, I always say it's a matter of coincidence in life. I got interested in the field of cardiology when I was working as a staff nurse at the emergency department. That's where I started to work. And cardiac patients were so fascinating to me. We saw a lot of people with infarctions. This was the era before PCI, so thrombolysis, the big trials were up and running. So this was a fast evolving area, and it intrigued me. So that was my first step into cardiology. And then from emergency department, I moved to become a nurse at a cardiac ward. And another coincidence was that there was a session organized, a seminar for the nurses organized by a new adult congenital heart disease cardiologist, Professor Butz. And he was talking about what congenital heart disease is about, the different defects, the operation techniques. But the key message was that these people do not only need medical care, they need an interdisciplinary or an interprofessional approach. And to a certain extent, I was intrigued, because I thought, if this is true, then we as nurses have a place for congenital heart disease, and I wanted to see what is known in nursing research. And this was wasteland. There was nothing there in terms of nursing research. And that was the moment I thought, this will be my niche. This is where I want to contribute to.
So this is the pioneering work on the field, so indeed you must be congratulated. And with this line of thought, how would you encourage the young nurses to find their motivation, to find their line of interest in research within?
Well, it's a matter of opportunities, it's a matter of coincidence, but I would advise, look out for opportunities, look for those areas that are fascinating for you, that are areas where you think, this is close to my heart, this is where I want to work at, this is where I want to make a difference, where I want to contribute to.
You make a very important point, which is opportunities. And I'm from Barcelona, I'm from here, and I would dare to say that the opportunities we have in Spain for nurses are not the same as the ones you find in the Northern Europe. So could you please comment on this, because it's different. They're different depending on the regions and you work with. Differences. What are the limitations? Why is not so well supported here?
Yeah. True, there is quite some variability in the place of nursing research in the different European countries. And like you said, the Nordic countries are well advanced. And this has to do with the fact that in Nordic countries, care science is important. And Nordic countries are really investing in care science. It doesn't mean that in other European countries nothing is happening. Absolutely, there is also a trend. But we see this kind of evolution, maybe a bit inspired by the Nordics, but you see more nurses going into scientific education. More master's programs are not only going for management, but also clinical training, scientific training for nurses. You see this development. And this will go hand in hand with the notice in the community, the notice in funding agencies that we should not only focus in the basic science, which is important, absolutely, but there also is a need for care science. We also need to understand what is the kind of interventions, care interventions, nursing interventions that work, what is working for which patients, how can we translate what we learn from basic science, what we learn from developments in the field, how can we translate this to clinical practice? Because that is a challenge. And you see this development in the rest of Europe. Some countries are moving faster than other countries, but we see that it goes in a good direction. So if you compare the Nordics with, for instance, the Mediterranean area, there is a difference. Yes, that's true. But a lot is happening in Spain, in Portugal, in Italy, Greece as well.
And hopefully we'll keep growing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
After the interview.
Yeah.
And I was also wondering, because you lead two departments. You lead one at Leuven in Belgium, and you lead another one in Sweden. And so how you have, you have a track record which is outstanding. And which would your major achievement would be? And to reach them, what have you been found in the way there? And they had probably disappointed you, and perhaps you were about to just give up, and you did not.
Well, in terms of achievements, I think it has to do with looking for opportunities, creating opportunities, and building up great relationships with people to work with. What I learned from my mentor when I was doing my PhD, she always said, choose your partners. And that is something that I value highly. Indeed, I mean, we need, and there is a lot we can do, but if you can do this together with people you have this interpersonal connection with, where it is fun to work with, it adds to the pleasure and it adds to what you can do. So then it doesn't feel like work, it feels like this is something that is fun to do, this is something that is giving back to yourself as well. Of course, there are challenges, and probably the most important challenge is getting funding for the research that you want to do. And we talked about this as well. It's not always easy to find the funding, and sometimes it is not easy to find the funding in your own region, in your own hospital, in your own country. But then look for opportunities to collaborate with other settings. And that is, for instance, the reason why I accepted the invitation to work at Gothenburg University, because I understood that caring science is so important in the Nordic countries, and a lot of the ideas for potential research that I could not do in Belgium, I could do that in Sweden. And in Belgium I'm doing different kinds of work. So once again, it has to do with look what is important in which setting and try to bring ideas there and work with people there.
In this point, this morning, you very interestingly pointed out that we have to move from observational studies to interventional studies, and I would like to comment on that, because this is, I think, it's one of the topics that the ESC is strengthening every time more. You have to do interventional research, and you have to increase. So, again, this goes hand by hand to get funding.
Absolutely.
And so, how do you envision this? Because how would you encourage the nurse that are doing their progress in the research lead arena, how to follow this path?
Yeah, no, absolutely true. And sometimes, and I don't say all observational studies, but sometimes you can do observational studies with a very low budget or no budget at all, if you work with master students in terms of their thesis and so on. But once that you move to interventional studies and using randomized control trial designs, this is another game. Yeah. There you need funding, absolutely. And to a certain extent, once again, you see that funding agencies become more and more willing to fund this project, but then also you need to go there with ambitious and high-level research.
Yes, skills too.
And the skills.
Not so easy at all.
And that is absolutely something we need to continue to work on, to build the capacity within nurse researchers, allied health professional researchers, to build the competencies to run high-level trials, to make sure that everyone has the competencies, or everyone who end up in an RCT has the competencies to do so. Yeah. And once that you come to funding agencies and say, okay, this is what we learned from observational studies, now it's time to bring this to efficacy research or effectiveness research, it's easier to get the funding than once that you come with an idea on doing an additional observational study. Yeah.
Because you have already led one trial and you're about to lead the second one, so you're a master on this. Congratulations. And a different aspect, let's talk about a bit the gender balance, because I'm about curious about how do you think it's gender balance implemented in nurse research and throughout Europe? How do you envision, how is it moving?
Yeah. Well, this is indeed an interesting question. And quite often we realize that within the nursing profession there are great developments ongoing, but that doesn't mean that we have the entire nurse profession with us. So there is still a large group of nurses who do not connect with the scientific developments, and there are maybe different reasons for that. On one hand, it has to do with, is nursing training embedding scientific methods in this? Are nurses trained to understand that you need science to develop? Or are they only trained for you do this and this and that then you are a good nurse? So that's one thing. I think another aspect that plays a role is the scientific knowledge, the scientific language is English. Language can be a barrier for quite some nurses in countries where English is not the first language. So this is a barrier as well. And how can we make sure that we bring the non-English speaking nurses also at the level of the scientific inspiration? So that's a challenge. Gender balance, as you said, I mean, places like this, an ESC conference, is a great place to learn, to get motivated, to get inspired and so on. Let's be honest, the majority of the nurses are female, and it may be less easy to come to a conference for 3-4 days if you have a young family. So probably the gender plays a role here, and the responsibilities for families that women quite often have take up value in their life, that also may play a part in these aspects.
So in order to finish the interview and following your last comment, what would you tell to a young nurse that wants to involve herself in research? Just a sentence to finish, and encourage her to keep your track and work with your spirit within this field. What would you tell her or him? Follow
your dreams and never underestimate the impact that you can have. In whatever role you end up, be it in clinic, be it in teaching, be it in research, you have an impact. And it's not that things are happening outside us, we can take it in our own hands. And nurses need to realize that indeed we can have an impact, and you should take that. Thank you so much. I think that with this inspiring sentence, we finish. I want to thank you again for accepting to be an interview here, and my most sincere congratulations for giving this wonderful lecture. I would encourage all the attendees, please, to read the newspaper today, because in the front page, it's all an interview about Professor Philip Moon. It's a pleasure. Goodbye to everybody, and thank you for being here.